Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It is time to have a look at the suggestions past the developers for September 2024, and this time we're having a look at the aviation side of things. There's a lot of stuff to go through here, and a lot of it is actually really cool. We have some ramjet stuff, we have some pretty cool Second World War stuff, and also a few modern munitions. Let's get into it, and as always, if you enjoy this type of content, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. The first suggestion is for Germany, and it is the Diehl BGT Defense HOSBO glide bomb. During the 1990s, it became clear to the German Air Force that the future of air support was going to lay in precision armaments, in order to both ensure that the mission would be successfully completed and that collateral damage was kept to a minimum. To meet this requirement, the Air Force would adopt a few solutions, including the GBU-24 laser-guided bomb and the Taurus KEPD-350 cruise missile. These were not without their issues, however, as the GBU-24 required that a target be continuously eliminated by a laser from firing aircraft, thereby increasing its needed loiter time and placing the aircraft at continued risk. The Taurus resolved many of these issues, being long-range, accurate, GPS-guided, and also with a powerful payload, though its steep price tag meant that its deployment would never be cost-effective. From this, Diehl BGT would recognize an opportunity to develop a weapon that was not only cost-effective, but long-range, and precise with minimal input from the operator required after launch. This led Diehl to the development of the HOPE, which is the Hochleistung Penetrator, and also the HOSBO, which is the Hochleistung Sprengbomb, this series of guided glide bombs in 1997. The German Air Force became very interested in the potential of this new weapon and would work closely with Diehl during its development. It was revealed to the public in IAI of 2004 in Berlin, with tests being conducted from 2004 to 2008 over the Mediterranean and the Vidsel test range in northern Sweden by WTD-61, as well as at Meppen by WTD-91. The HOPE and HOSBO systems were developed in tandem and as a result have almost 100% parts commonality. The main difference lay in their warheads, with the HOPE featuring a penetrator similar to the Taurus that was capable of punching through bunkers and also hardened aircraft shelters, while the HOSBO featuring the use of a more conventional explosive payload and also submunitions ranging from 125 to 950 kilo. For HOSBO in particular, its range and maneuverability present in important aspect of its mission profile, being able to engage enemy air defenses outside their effective range and engage moving targets such as high-speed boats and fast-moving vehicles. Upon being launched from the aircraft, HOPE and also HOSBO would roll 180 degrees and deploy its scissor wings from the center. Unfortunately, despite extensive testing and development, both the HOPE and HOSBO would remain as prototypes and be shelved by Diehl. It would be briefly resurrected as the Pylum, which was overall very similar to them, but featured an infrared seeker of Rafael's Spice glide bomb. The next vehicle is for Russia, and it's the I-153DM4. This is a Chaika with access to ramjets. The I-153 series itself was an evolution of the earlier I-15 and 152 planes, known for their agility and also distinctive gull-wing design. The Chaika featured retractable landing gear, a significant advancement for biplanes of the era. The addition of the ramjets to the I-153DM was a bold experiment aimed at significantly enhancing the aircraft's speed and also overall performance. Ramjets, a type of jet engine that operates by compressing incoming air with the aircraft's forward motion before combustion, were an emerging technology promising higher speeds without the complexity of conventional jet engines. However, ramjets are only effective at high speeds, meaning they needed assistance to reach operational velocities. The I-153DM ramjet Chaika underwent a series of trials to test the feasibility and also performance of combining ramjets with radial engines. The ramjets, although theoretically promising, faced practical difficulties in terms of integration with the biplane design and achieving the necessary speeds for effective operation. Additionally, the added weight and complexity of the ramjet system affected the aircraft's handling and also reliability. The Chaika did not proceed beyond the experimental stage with the ramjet and was never mass-produced or deployed in combat. Its development did contribute valuable insights, though, into the potential and limitations of integrating advanced propulsion systems with traditional aircraft designs. The lessons learned from these experiments informed subsequent advancements in jet propulsion and aircraft designed during and after the Second World War. For Japan, we have the Aichi M6A1 Seiran. The Imperial Japanese Navy was the only navy in the world in 1942 to have a fleet of submarine aircraft carriers. These ships were not equipped with specially designed aircraft, but with ordinary carrier-based aircraft, such as the Yokosuka E-14Y1. Since these planes were not built to actually be housed on submarine carriers, it didn't exactly work perfectly. So in 1942, the IGN Command decided to change the requirements for submarine carriers. The plane had to fit in the hangar, which was 3.5 meters wide, have a decently sized amount of munitions, be able to be launched from a catapult, and also be a seaplane, and also have a range of 1,500 kilometers. The Aichi plant, which had experience in the production of reconnaissance seaplanes, was designated to work on a new aircraft. The work was supervised by Horio Ozaki. In the summer of 1942, a wooden model of the aircraft was ready, which had folding wings backwards, which made the width only 2.46 meters. In September 1942, a Yokosuka E-14Y aircraft, launched from the I-25 submarine, carried out an attack on the forests of Oregon. This attack was not stopped by the US Army or the Air Force, which confirmed the assumption that the M6A1s would be able to attack the West Coast with impunity without consequences. At the beginning of 1943, the construction of 6 prototype Aichi M6A1 aircraft began, 2 of which were produced as a training version, which had retractable landing gear with wheels. This version was called the Aichi M6A1K Nanzan. The first prototype of the M6A1 was ready on the 18th of November 1943, the second in February of 44, and at that time tests began where the aircraft actually passed successfully. The M6A1 was then directed to serial production. The first serial aircraft was ready in October of 44, then the next 7 in December, which allowed the training of new crews for it, and also new crews for the I-400, the 401, the 13, and also the 14 submarines. Due to the very high complexity of the design, and also the high price, basically one Aichi M6A1 cost as much as 50 Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters. Only 28 of them were actually produced, along with the prototypes by the end of the war. The 631st Naval Aviation Squadron, to which all of the aircraft were assigned, were part of the 6th Fleet, and began in January 1945 to prepare for a surprise attack on the Panama Canal. Work on the operational plan lasted from the end of March to the beginning of April, then pilot exercises to attack the canal began, and on the 25th of April 1945, the plan for the attack was presented to the officers and crew. Squadron Commander Fukunaga insisted that to achieve the best result, the M6A1 had to be used as a kamikaze aircraft, and ordered the aircraft to be converted so that it would not be possible to drop a bomb with the dropper. 10 aircraft, 8 with bombs and 2 with torpedoes, were to take part in the attack. The Gatun Lock, which was located on the Atlantic side, was to be attacked. However, due to the worsening war situation, mainly the fall of Okinawa, the plan to attack the Panama Canal was abandoned in June. It was decided that the target of attack would be the US Navy anchorage in Truk Atoll. It was planned to use 6 M6A1 planes for the attack, which were to be painted and marked like American planes to make a surprise attack. Operation Storm was launched on the 23rd of July, with the I-400 and the 401 departing for Truk Atoll, with 6 Aichi M6A1 aircraft on board. On the night of the 14th of August 1945, the I-400 arrives at the indicated rendezvous point with the 401, and then the crew was preparing to attack when suddenly, the next day, on the 15th of August 1945, they received the announcement about the surrender of the Empire of Japan. The crew of the I-400 and I-401 decided not to attack and not carry it out, so they threw the M6A1 planes overboard along with all their ammunition and secret documents. After the surrender of Japan, the American Army managed to find a pair of incomplete M6A1s, and a working M6A1 aircraft was also found, which went to the US for testing. This vehicle used the V12 engine, the Atsuta Type 32, which gave it 1400 horsepower. It had one 13.2mm machine gun on a movable mount used by a rear gunner, and could also carry up to 1,000 kilos worth of bombs. For Taiwan, we have the AC-119. During the late 1950s and 60s, the Republic of China Air Force replaced their old C-46 transports with C-119G cargo planes. These aircraft will go on to serve a great multitude of roles, from being a regular cargo and transport aircraft to aerial photography, ambulatory or emergency services, cloud seeding, firefighting, shore patrol, bomber, gunship, and also many more. In 1967, 22 C-119G aircraft had their propellers converted from 4-bladed to 3-bladed. This Taiwanese modification would be known as the 119L. However, this wouldn't be the only major modification to be made to the aircraft. In the early 1970s, upon seeing the success of US cargo planes converted into gunships during the Vietnam War, the ROCAF became interested in converting their own C-119 cargo planes into AC-119 gunships. The need for gunships arose when the ROCAF figured they'd need a way to shoot at PLA soldiers, ships, and also equipment landing on their nearby beachheads of Taiwan, and also the outer islands in the event of a war. Initially, around 10 C-119s were converted to AC-119s, and 3 to 4 possible weapon variations existed. The most common variant was the AC-119s mounted with 6 M3 Browning machine guns from the F-86 Sabre. This version could switch out one of the M3s for a 20mm M39A1 cannon. The guns were electronically operated and were fixed in place at 30 degrees downwards. In early versions, a 20mm M39A1 cannon from the F-100s were mounted in the nose of the aircraft, along with 6 50 cal M3 machine guns, which were mounted on the left side. The nose cannon allowed the aircraft to perform diving attacks. However, the nose cannon was removed shortly after AC-119 number 3164 crashed, and also all the crew were killed. Investigations found the nose cannon caused excessive resistance, and which led to one of the engines to overheat and catch fire. The guns were aimed and fired by the pilot or co-pilot in the cockpit using a gun camera. The navigator operated an infrared sight and gave the pilots information on wind direction and speed. The communications officer helped with in-air enemy concerns and also listened to various communication messages. Chief engineer and loading chief assists the captain to check the breaker and machine gun switch, and the armorer took care of reloading and maintaining the guns, along with operating the searchlight for nighttime missions. Training missions were conducted at sea, and the usual firing altitude was around 1,200 to 3,000 feet. During nighttime training missions, flares were dropped from the aircraft to illuminate its targets before shooting. During operations, pilots would often report extreme shaking of the aircraft due to the recoil of the guns firing. In 1996, during Taiwan's Strait crisis, a few C-119s were converted to AC-119s, but with 2 M61 Vulcans taken from retiring F-104 fighters. They were mounted in the belly of the aircraft and were mainly used to help defend Taiwan's outer islands, just in case of war breaking out during the crisis. The ROCAF AC-119 short revival during the third Taiwan Strait crisis would be the last time such an aircraft would fly over Taiwanese skies. By the early to mid-2000s, most C-119s would be taken out of service and replaced with the C-130. For Italy, we have the Breda Ba.201. This was a dive bomber, which was developed by the Italian company Società Italiana e Nosto Breda in 1940. In 1939, the Italian Air Force requested a dive bomber, single-engined, and also a low-wing monoplane. Breda, who at the time had studied the Stuka bomber, participated in this request. The Ba.201 was a simple but modern-looking project. It was built entirely out of metal, with a thin fuselage with metal tubes and duralumin panels. The low wing was equipped with aerodynamic brakes and resumed the inverted gull-wing configuration and incorporated fully inward retractable landing gear. The undercarriage itself was equipped with a partially enclosed rear wheel, and the engine which equipped this vehicle was the DB601, which was built under license by Alfa Romeo from Germany, combined with a triple metal propeller. There were two prototype aircraft, which were built with different configurations of basically where the bombs were. One was inside the compartment in the fuselage, and then the other one was external. Only two of these were built, though. The first was destroyed during testing, and the second passed the tests and actually impressed with its flight capabilities. But the project was abandoned because of the few available engines, which had to go to the fighters. So therefore, this vehicle never really went anywhere. For the French, we have a Dutch fighter, the Koolhoven F.K.58. At the end of the 1930s, the French government was desperate for more fighter aircraft, and so then started looking towards both domestic and also foreign options to fill this demand. But on the foreign market, things were not as easy. The Curtiss Wright Hawks the French had ordered were very expensive, and also the British air industry had their hands full with RAF orders. Germany was seen as a potential future enemy, so no requests were made towards them. The only option that remained was the Netherlands, but even here, the biggest company, Fokker, also had their hands full with orders for the Dutch Air Force, and so the next best option was the Dutch company Koolhoven. The founder of Koolhoven, Frits Koolhoven, was certainly an interesting man, and when the French contacted him about their problem, Mr. Koolhoven simply replied with, "So you need fast and excellent fighter aircraft? Well, let's just build one for you." And so, works immediately started on the new aircraft, given the design number 116, and when the design reached a further stage, the name became the FK-58. Two prototypes were made and tested by Koolhoven, and also handed over to the French for a short time so they could test fly them too. Overall, the results were very good, and in January of 1939, the French government made an order of 50 FK-58s. But unlike the prototypes, which were fitted with Hispano-Suiza 14AA engines, the French models had to be fitted with the Nomron 14N39. But Frits Koolhoven was so certain that the FK-58 would sell that he had already started production of the aircraft before the proper French order was made, and so the first four that were already under construction were already being fitted with the Hispano-Suiza 14AA engine. After a little discussion, the French agreed to accept these four, even though they had the wrong engine. These four FK-58s were given the Dutch civilian registration numbers of PHAVB, E, G, and also H. When they arrived in France, these names were removed, and then they were given French registration numbers, which was the CO 16, 17, 18, and 19. The four aircraft were test flown by French pilots shortly after they arrived, and the results were not good. It turned out that a 100-kilo counterweight was installed on the aircraft. The Hispano-Suiza 14AA engine was still very experimental, and it turned out to be heavier than advertised, so the counterweight was added to fix the center of gravity. This ended up hurting the performance of the aircraft, and so all four were denied for the French Air Force. The aircraft ended up being given to a training squadron, two of them later ending up in the mechanics training school. The remaining two planes that were still with the training squadron ended up getting bombed by the Luftwaffe when they attacked France. For Sweden, we have an American vehicle, the Northrop Model 8A1, or the B-5B, which was the Swedish designation. This was an American two-seated attack bomber designed by Northrop. The initial variant, the A-17, entered service in 1936 by the United States Army Air Force. The aircraft was also bought by several other nations, including Iraq and the Netherlands. However, we're going to have a look at the Swedish one specifically. In September of 1938, the Swedish government ordered 40 exported versions of the Northrop A-17, designated as the Northrop Model 8A1, which the Swedish Air Force designated as the B-5B. But due to increasing tensions in Europe, as the Second World War was drawing ever so closer, in August 1939, the Swedish government opted to order an additional 24 more of these aircraft. This made the total around 64, which was then divided to the F-4 and the F-6 flight squadrons. In total, the Swedish Air Force operated around 100 of the B-5 bomber, in which they purchased additional 38 aircraft in May 1940, which is known as the B-5C. By 1944, though, the aircraft began to be replaced by the more modern Saab 17, or the B-17 dive bomber. The reasons varied from the slow mobility and vulnerability against more modern aircraft at the time, but it wasn't until the early 1950s, which was when the last B-5s were taken off from Swedish service, as it continued to serve the Air Force, ranging from training aircraft for cadets to reconnaissance operations. The Swedish variant was different to the American in terms of engine and also in terms of guns, where the American version used the Pratt & Whitney R153513 engine, which had 750 horsepower. The Swedish variant used the NOHAB Mercury 24 engine, which gave it 980 horsepower. It also had slight changes to the canopy, and it had access to the 8mm guns from the Swedish instead of the standard 7.62mm. Because also it had the better engine, it could carry more. So instead of being around about 250 kilos, it could carry 700 to 800 kilos, which was really nice. We have an Israeli MiG-21, the MiG-21 2000. This is an evolution of the classic MiG-21 fighter aircraft, brought to a more modern standard by the Lahav division of Israel Aerospace Industries. This upgraded version has been meticulously designed to enhance the pilot's experience and also improve the aircraft's performance. The cockpit of the MiG-21 2000 has been completely redesigned to be more user-friendly. It now includes a heads-up display, multifunction color displays at eye level, and hands-on throttle and stick control. It also includes a solid-state charge-coupled device, the camera. These enhancements address the limitations of the original MiG-21's cockpit, which was known for being cramped and lacking a modern interface for characteristics. One of the standout features of the MiG-21 2000 is the display and sight helmet system. This innovative system allows the pilot to aim the aircraft's weapon simply by looking at the target. The dash system measures the direction of the pilot's gaze relative to the aircraft and relays this information to the aircraft's sensors, avionics, and weapon systems. While the original MiG-21 was a daylight interceptor without radar, armed with guns and missiles on two-wing pylons, the MiG-21 2000 is an all-weather interceptor and also ground attack aircraft. Basically, the MiG-21 2000 doesn't really have a lot of history, as it's quite obscure. It was first showcased in 1993 at the Paris Air Show. Not a lot was shown, aside from a few weapons it could have carried, as well as its upgraded ELTA EL-M2032 radar. However, in 1998, it had its first series of test flights at the Ben Gurion International Airport in Tel Aviv, where it exceeded the original expectations. It also should be noted that the very first model of the MiG-21 2000 was a 21 bis that was bought from Nigeria. The MiG-21 2000 somewhat went well into the future, being sold to Cambodia, Uganda, and also Zambia. But sadly, the original IAI 304 MiG-21 2000 rots somewhere outside of Tel Aviv. This vehicle had access to 4 or 5 hardpoints, depending on what you wanted set up. It had one GSH-23L with 200 rounds, unguided rockets, such as the S-24s and UB-1657s. It also could carry a lightning pod, which is interesting. And for air-to-air missiles, you had the R3Ss or Rs, and then the Python 3 or 4s. For the Dutch, we have the Schelde S-21. This is a fighter that was never finished. The S-21 was made of an all-metal construction, had one pilot and a mid-wing configuration. It would have been powered by a 1085 horsepower Daimler-Benz DB600GA engine that was mounted in the aircraft in a pusher configuration. In order to get around the propeller at the back, a twin boom configuration was used for the tail of the aircraft, which was then connected by a single elevator. The push engine configuration also led to the designers giving the aircraft a tricycle landing gear. This had the benefit of giving the pilot a better view for the ground while taking off or landing. One important thing the Schelde wanted for this aircraft was for it to be very easy to fly. As for weaponry, the aircraft was going to be pretty heavily armed. The main weapon was to be a 23mm Madsen autocannon. While the 23mm Madsen was not in service with the Dutch Air Force, the autocannon had already been tested on the Fokker G1 prototype, so the Air Force did show interest into it. Further weapons included 4 forward-firing 7.9mm FN machine guns that were located next to the pilot, with 2 either side. But there was also a 5th 7.92mm FN machine gun located on the aircraft. This one was mounted inside the engine propeller shaft, and it also fired backwards. This fixed machine gun could have been used to scare off enemy aircraft that flew behind it. The pilot could pitch the aircraft up and down, and by firing the machine gun, it would create a wave of bullets. 2 more 50-kilo bombs could be carried inside the wing, right where the tail connects up to the wing. Instead of the 50-kilo bombs, 2 loads of steel arrows could also be fitted, which were more of a First World War era anti-infantry weapon. But there is also something very unique about the main cannon. It is not actually fixed to the airframe. Instead, it's actually on a flexible mount. The pilot had the ability to fix the gun in a horizontal position by just firing forwards, or it could be fixed at a downward angle of 25 degrees. By putting the gun downwards, the pilot could fly the aircraft above the enemy bomber formations and then fire downwards into it, kind of like the Shroud music, but the other way around. Even more crazy than that, though, the S-21 was also planned to get an autopilot. Not like the modern-day computers that can, automatically land an aircraft. The S-21 was planned with a more simple system that would simply keep the aircraft in level flight. Why was this planned for the aircraft, you ask? Well, like already posted, the main gun was on a flexible mounting. So instead of fixing the gun in a forward or downward position, the pilot could also just unlock it entirely and aim it just like the gunner on a bomber could. So the aircraft could be put in autopilot mode, and the pilot could put all his focus on firing the main gun accurately at enemy bomber formations. Unfortunately, on the 10th of May 1940, Germany invaded the Netherlands, and the S-21 was still under construction. The aircraft was about halfway done, with the airframe being almost completed. But all of the photos show an unfinished airframe and also an engine not being fitted, mainly because the engine was a German one from Daimler-Benz, and since Germany had already started the Second World War, they weren't going to give them a Daimler-Benz. What exactly happened to the aircraft following the German occupation is not exactly clear. On the 15th of December 1941, the commander of the German Wehrmacht stationed in the Netherlands made a report to the Minister of the German Air Force where the S-21 was still listed as a Buteflugzeug, or a trophy aircraft. There is another report from May 1943 where it mentions that the S-21 airframe was hanging off the ceiling in the factory hall of the Schelde facility, only for it to be taken away by the Germans later. What the Germans did with the airframe is not known, but it was most likely destroyed, which put an end to the very unique aircraft. One of the great things about having these designs is you can have completely ridiculous parts of it, and people really enjoy it and want to see it in things. But as usual, since it was never finished, and also never tested, I'm sure there would have been a bunch of problems with it if this had gone to fruition. Still interesting to think about. As always though, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.